Vivek Ramaswamy and Jordan Peterson did an hour and 40-minute long podcast, and this clip is the most replayed clip in the whole podcast, so I'm excited to get into it with you. My name is Aaron. Welcome to the channel. I do reviews on all things pop culture from a Christian perspective, and so with that out of the way, let's get right into the video with Jordan Peterson picking up on identity.
Now, on the identity front, you laid out a bunch of issues that I think are extremely relevant. So you know that people are struggling with their identities. And what's happened is they're also being offered a one idea fits all problem solution, which is, well, your identity is nothing other than your group identity. It's your sexual proclivity, which is a pretty pathetic identity. It's your ethnicity, it's your race, it's some group identity, which also takes the responsibility off of you, by the way. Now, you might say, well, what constitutes a valid identity in contrast to that? And you've already pointed to a number of those things. So this is also where I think the psychological community has failed to a large degree on this front. Now, we're the heirs of a liberal Protestant tradition, socially and psychologically. And we believe that our identities are fundamentally individual and subjective. Okay, but that's actually not true, because your identity is nested. Now, you pointed, so let's think of nestings, okay? Because we could build a hierarchy that's a proper hierarchy conceptually. And this is a good way of formulating what actually constitutes a robust identity. This is where you'd get signal for those those forays
sonar
that you're putting out, those
sonar
tests.
signals.
The sonar, exactly. Okay, so look, a person has to be bound into an intimate relationship. And everybody needs and wants that. So that's the first level of social integration. And then the couple has to be integrated within a family. And then the family within a neighborhood, and the neighborhood within a community, and the community within a town within the state within a nation, and then the nation, let's say, into something approximating whatever web of international agreements is necessary to minimally keep the peace. Well, that's a subsidiary hierarchy of responsibility. You know, and in Exodus, in the Old Testament book Exodus, part of what that book addresses is what forms of governance are necessary as an alternative to tyranny, so single top-down tyranny, the Pharaoh, or the desert, which is, completely scattered individuality. And the answer is, the technical answer is a subsidiary hierarchy of responsibility. And so that means, as an individual, you have a responsibility, as a couple, as a family member, as a community member, and all of those. And then you can think of identity as the belonging in all of those hierarchical positions. And you can think of psychological health not as something that occurs in an interior space, but as the harmony between all of those subsidiary levels. So it's an emergent property of harmony and not something that's carried internally.
So we're going to break into a commercial right there, but I think there are three things that really stood out to me as Jordan Peterson was talking about. Number one, he's talking about poor identity. Number two, parents. And number three, priority. The first one as a poor identity. He really laid it out. He was saying that a poor identity is, sexual proclivity, gender, race, that those are poor identities because those are group identities. And that's different from what he says is a nested identity. And I think this is totally true because it's very difficult, near impossible for someone to say, yeah, I have an idea of myself, my own self-identity I've concocted within my own brain. No, it is never like that. And if someone has the bravado to say, I know who I am, no, they don't. Their identity is shaped in one way or another with the push and pull of other people's opinions. Some people, they hold their opinion much higher, and so their identity is shaped more. Some people, they hold their opinion much lower, and their opinion on them doesn't shape their identity as much, but maybe it still might, just in a small degree or incremental way. So yeah, this identity of having a nested identity within these different relationships is very, very important. Number two is parents. One thing that I didn't hear him say was the parents when you were first born. His first example of having identity was within a coupled relationship. I don't assume, I'm assuming he knows, right? This is not an exhaustive list. Maybe he's just kind of talking about it. But I think it's worthwhile to extend that definition to your first identity, in my opinion, my humble lizard brain opinion, is your relationship with your mom and dad, or lack thereof. That is the benchmark, foundation, bedrock of anyone's identity, is what is their relationship to their father? What is their relationship to their mother? Right? That is it. To not acknowledge that, I think is a mistake. Maybe it's just a careless, just roll off. So I'm not trying to even pretend like I'm smart. I know something that Jordan Peterson doesn't know. I'm sure he knows that. He talks extensively about early childhood development. But however, it begs to be mentioned here that first identity is not within a coupled relationship, but within a mother, father, and son, daughter, child relationship. And that will, if there's a lacking relationship there, man, the kid is messed up for the rest of their life. They will have struggles for the rest of their life if that relationship is chaotic or volatile. And the third one is priority. I love that he said subsidiary. I interpreted that as there is a priority of identities in your life. For example, my identity on YouTube is not equal to my identity with my wife. And when I prioritize my YouTube identity versus my identity inside my marriage, there's no harmony and there's chaos in my life. And I think that's the same for a lot of people. If you're a child, if you're not married, your priority, your identity is with your parents, right? Like that's obvious. And if that is in turmoil, all your other identities at school, with your friends, at work, with a future boyfriend, girlfriend, they're all in trouble because you'll be dealing with the repercussions of a chaotic identity with your, with your parents, with your dad or mom. And so I think to highlight that a priority of identities is harmony, and that harmony is your mental health. And I thought harmony was a precise and beautiful word to describe how our self-identities come to be. It's such a complicated issue because with your one type of you with your friends, and you're another type of you with your wife or your husband, your spouse, and another type of you with your parents or a mentor or whatever. And so which one is the real you? Well, it's actually the encapsulated total, and that identity shifts, but there is still a core to you. Now, the question is, what is the most important identity? What is the priority identity? What is the identity that is the foundational bedrock for all other identities? Now, from a Christian perspective, that answer would be your identity in Jesus Christ, the creator of the world, the one who made you, the one who gives you life and value, the one who saved you from your sin, saved you from hell, and saved you to him. That is our chief identity. So if you have this identity at work and that is stripped away from you, you are still you. You didn't lose a sense of you. You are still you with your foundational identity being in Jesus Christ. If your identity is with your spouse, husband, wife, right? Mom, dad, if that is stripped away from you, you are still you. You are still in Jesus Christ, because your chief identity must be rooted in something that cannot be taken away from you. Now, for some people, that's why they place it in their race or their sex, because you can't take that away from them. But sometimes you can, right? A lot of times we don't see race, and so and someone else's opinion can take that essentially away from you, and not like physically, but like essentially, right? However, Jesus Christ can never be taken away from you. Any other identity in this world if you have all this, you're the guy with all the money, all the cars, you're the guy who's successful, that can be taken away from you. You're the healthy dude, that could be taken away from you. You're the guy who has all the friends, who has a great parents, it could all be stripped from you. So what are you then? That's where people have this midlife crisis over here, like turmoil in their life, because they don't know who they are, because they've attached their identity to something that can be taken away from them, and it was taken away from them. However, Jesus Christ is the only thing that cannot be taken from you in this life. And so, like I said, even to race or sex, right? People can take those things away from you. You can essentially be not known as whatever your race is, right? Like, it happens to black people all the time. No, I'm not black, I'm African. No, I'm not African, I'm Bahamian, I'm Jamaican. Like, and they mislabel your race all the time. Like, that's taken away from you, essentially, your label that you place on yourself. However, that one thing, the actual thing that cannot be taken away from you is Jesus Christ. Anyway, that's a long way to put that. Those are just some deep thoughts, especially on the topic of identity. But we're going to skip over this advertisement that he has into what Vivek has as a response to it, which is takes more of a practical term, especially in his presidential race.
Beautiful stuff, actually. And when you just described the desert versus Pharaoh dynamic there, the separation, something clicked for me. Okay.
Yeah, well, it's a killer set of ideas.
Well, I mean, in a much more practical sense for me, in something as mundane as a political race here. Okay, it clicks for me why I'm doing this. Is that, yeah, you're right. You and I and others like us have complained about how the left has actually preyed on that vacuum by at least offering a substantive, even if false, fundamentally artificial set of identities to fill that void. But actually, I'm sick of complaining about that without critiquing the conservative movement. Where's the conservative movement in filling that identity with an alternative, right? We can we can do all the hand-wringing we want. Where are we? Over the last 10 years, where's our leadership? Where's the leadership of, for example, a conservative movement, pro-American movement, pro-national movement, pro-family movement, whatever you want to call it? These guys have been asleep at the switch while they've been watching the other side take advantage of this. And that kind of...
Well, not just that. It's worse than that. Like if you look,
they're participating in it in some ways.
Well,
they're participating.
Well, it's the conservatives. It's the conservatives in the UK who've been putting forward the net zero agenda.
Exactly. So especially in Western Europe, but even some wings of the Republican Party in the U.S. are their meek response is effectively participating in this. And this is where the analogy that it hit me when you're talking about the desert and Pharaoh is that we as a people are lost in the desert, and yet we're criticizing that phenomenon by still critiquing Pharaoh. Well, the Israelites are ready to go. Right. Many of them are already gone. Okay, that's where a lot of the grassroots movement that I'm leading already and hoping to lead is. We're already in the desert. We're still lost, though. We're not going to find the promised land by still criticizing Pharaoh. To the contrary, the longer you're lost, the more likely it is the people are going to say that I need to go back and bend the knee to Pharaoh. Actually, I want to be ruled by Pharaoh. That's exactly what's happening. So where is the promised land? And I'm not going to, this analogy is really in a weird place. I'm not going to claim to be a Moses figure or anything like that. That's beyond any of our pay grade. But I will say, when I laid out in this room the video where we launched this presidential campaign from right here in the front foyer of my house, we said that my goal is to create a new American dream for the 21st century. Okay, FDR had his New Deal. I don't agree with a lot of it, but FDR had his New Deal. JFK had his New Frontier. Where's the conservative vision of where we're going? That's what I call the new dream, the new American dream. It's not just about money. Yeah. It's about reviving our conviction in our purpose as citizens. What does that mean? The unapologetic pursuit of excellence. I can talk about what that means, but that's my vision. Maybe a different candidate can offer theirs. And if this Republican primary ended up being a competition of those ideas and visions, man, our country's heading to a good place, but that's what's missing.
Yes, definitely. Well, okay, so let's
I just want to say two quick things about Vivek. Number one, what a humble guy. You could really sense the humble demeanor that he has, especially when he applied all of what Jordan Peterson was saying into what his context is. He's like, yeah, something as mundane as a political race. I mean, you're running for president of the United States. It's kind of a big deal, buddy. And yet he says it's mundane, or he says like, hey, this analogy is going into a weird place. I would never consider myself to be a Moses-like figure that's above everyone's pay grade. I thought that was really, really humble and admirable, and so I really appreciate that out of him. But number two, it's something that I disagreed with him, actually. It's when he said that the longer that the Israelites were in the wilderness, they then would become more apt to go back to Egypt and subjugate themselves to the tyranny of Pharaoh. That's not true. That's not what happened in the Bible. Actually, It's a testament to human fragility that in the Bible, after God parted the Red Sea and they walked through it on dry ground, it was just a few days when they got so hungry that they were telling and complaining and grumbling to God, and they were saying, oh man, at least in Egypt, we had food, we had water, we had everything we needed. And they actually reprogrammed their brain. They're not remembering correctly. They actually were starving in Egypt, and they were remembering something completely different. They had their imaginations twisted. And it shows the human fragility in that it could just be a few days without true identity to the human spirit to latch onto, that we will willingly subjugate ourselves to the tyrannical oppression of Pharaoh or whatever else, you just name it, right? And in this scenario, he's saying that, the longer we go without a human dream or a American dream or American identity, we will subjugate ourselves to, whatever agenda or the media or the government is pushing on us. But it's really, the story here is the human fragility. We need an identity to cling to. Otherwise, we subjugate ourselves to something that's bad for us. And so that's the second point that I want to make, is that it's so important for a Christian to understand that we are not just saved from hell and spared wrath and saved from our sins, even though that's true, but that's not just all, that we are saved to a life with and for Jesus Christ. We have a new identity to cling onto, to latch onto, and that was given to us in the person of Jesus Christ, that we would be more like him and walk with him. And it's this identity that we have in Christ, not just that we are saved and are objects of this, spared wrath, but that we have a higher calling, a higher identity that God has placed on us, a mandate that God has set before us before the foundations of the world, to live up and into that identity as a Christian, so that we could walk in righteousness, so that we could walk in love and forgiveness and mercy and show that kindness to other people. That's what living into our identity in Jesus Christ looks like, not just someone who's sitting on the sidelines waiting for heaven after that we've been spared hell, but that we actually can live into a higher purpose, more joy, more fulfillment in this life already, because we are living out that identity in Jesus Christ. If you like this type of content, let me know in the comment section below. But I have this question for you. What identity is are you nested in? What's your priority? What's your main identity? Or what is the priority and identity for most people around during this time in our generation? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.